Dave Hill is a comedian, writer, and musician. After playing in bands and getting a record deal, his sister, a journalist, helped him break into the writing field. But he realized early on that really he only enjoyed writing jokes. He drifted from Cleveland, Ohio to New York City, where he continued to write freelance pieces while also starting to contribute to TV shows. He then landed his own show, The King of Miami, and later his first book deal with St. Martin's Press. There's more to Dave's story, of course, which is why you're going to listen to today's podcast. But you should know that at the center of his process is a commitment to creative play, staying in the flow, and seeing what happens. To learn more, be sure to listen to today's episode of the Fearless Storyteller podcast. Hello, and welcome to the Fearless Storyteller podcast. I'm your host, Ethan Freckleton. Have you ever noticed how fear stops us from creating and sharing our best work? Join the Fearless Storyteller as we explore the heart and soul of writing stories, songs, and scripts that sell with the people who write them. Each guest has their own unique hero's journey and insights into the intersections between limiting beliefs and success. In exchange for your support on Patreon, you'll receive monthly one-on-one sessions with yours truly. I'm a certified master life coach, and I've worked with best-selling authors, award-winning filmmakers, and everything in between. Help fund the show today and get the support you need to take the next step forward on your own unique journey as a storyteller. Again, visit patreon.com/Ethan Freckleton. All right. Enough with that. On to today's show.
If the pandemic has taught me anything, it's really all I want to do is have snacks with my girlfriend and play with the dog. Really, and everything else is bonus content.
It's pretty sweet. Yeah. Well, let's try this again. Welcome to the podcast. I guess anybody who watches the video will see the whole thing, but for the
I did shower, so might as well give it to them.
Yeah. Give it to them. Well, for people who don't know you, what would you like to share about yourself?
I am Dave Hill. I'm a comedian, writer, musician, actor sometimes. I have a podcast. I'm easily distracted I just do the things I like, and I'm lucky enough that I've turned them into my living. Basically, I think by being ill-suited for any... I need to shut the door. The dog is misbehaving. Just getting scolded. Right, just such.
That's all right. Right now, I've got a guy spraying pesticide poison right outside the door, window right here, smiling and waving.
Excellent. I do those things, and I kind of, I'm fortunate enough that I've been able to make it my living, and I guess I'm, at this point in my life, closer to death than I am to birth, and I'm just hoping to keep going, doing the things that I enjoy. That's my story.
Yeah. So there's a mix of stuff, and professionally, and maybe an entry question then is like, what was the first thing?
Well, I think, probably me. I mean, not to really just sound like a whatever. But, I was originally like a visual artist, and that's what I wanted to do. And I'm kind of getting back to that now. And with the pandemic and some space to do a lot more artwork, so maybe who knows? Maybe I'll just go that route. Who knows? But I started playing in bands in my teens, and then I was like, I'm just gonna rock people as any, when you're young and you have a band. That's the plan, is to rock the people. So I did that, and and then, had a little bit of success, got a record deal after college with my friends and our band that we had, and toured around, had a video on MTV in the middle of the night and things like that. And then that kind of ran its course, as those things often do. And I went back to doing art, and then eventually drifted into writing from there, just as a result of being on the computer, and just started typing, and that grew from there. And I got into writing, and I've always acted like a complete idiot. So from there, I drifted into, comedy and, what acting or on camera stuff the president of show business allows me to do.
So what happened with the writing? Like when you sat down and started writing, what was going on there?
Well, it was. I was living with my sister at the time, when this, in the '90s, late '90s, and I was sort of trying to figure out what to do with my life. And my sister's a journalist, and we share. It was like we got the AOL software, not to brag, but we got the disc, and we got the internet at her house, and we didn't know that anyone would have more than one email address. We thought, oh, that's like a landline, right? You just have an email address for the house. So we shared an email address, and as a result, we would be just reading each other's messages like you would listen to the answering machine and be like, oh, hey, you got an email from this person. So we were just fully reading each other's emails, and she started reading my email for fun. I wasn't saying anything of great importance, just silliness, And she's like, oh, you should maybe think about doing some writing. And she got me she was at the Cleveland Plain Dealer at the time, and she got me into some writers' meetings, and I wrote some sort of human interest type, went to like a Civil War reenactment. I went to karaoke, kind of light human interest. There's a new chicken wing restaurant you got to try, that sort of thing. And in doing that, I thought, oh, maybe I could be a journalist or something. And I realized that I really only liked writing jokes and, I didn't really care about reporting and things like that. I just wanted to write something entertaining. I wasn't the journalist. Didn't care too much about that. I mean, I had adhered to the rules of journalism, which I think is not done so much anymore. Adhering to facts and fact checking and things that old men like me learned.
About the fourth estate? You remember hearing that term, the fourth estate?
I don't think so. What is that?
That was what journalism was called, at least in journalism theory, in the 20th century.
Oh, I mean, I never studied journalism. I just learned it from, I started writing for the Plain Dealer, and then I wrote for Salon, and
that sounds like a lesson for college kids who might be listening right there.
Yeah, so get on it.
Just have your sister get you in. That's the way. Skip.
Yeah. And so she was a great help, and saw that maybe I had this ability and encouraged me, and I think I saw that it was an opportunity to have some freedom, because I was getting freelance work, and I realized, well, if I can do this freelance writing, I don't have to paint houses anymore, and I didn't want to do that. And so I started, not calling, I would just email websites. I would email Salon, I email just whoever had an email address on their website, magazines. And I started writing for whoever would let me. And I wrote a few pieces for Salon. And then it kind of, I started writing for a TV show. Fortunately, I think a key, if I can say anything to the youths, is that it's good when your friends have their act together and have jobs and they can hire you. So I was fortunate that, I had friends working in television. I got hired to write for a show on HBO called Reverb. They just needed kind of interstitial things and things for the website. I did that about 20 years ago. And and then from that, I would just started drifting around, honestly, because I was making a little bit of money enough to, Cleveland, I had an apartment above a hair salon for $450. And I was like, all right, I can do this from anywhere that has a dial-up modem, I'm in. And so I started spending more time in New York, where I had gone to college at Fordham in the Bronx, and I was there visiting, and a buddy of mine, John Kimbrough, was doing the music for a show called Crash Test on Spike TV, and he said, I'm working on this show. You should go in to the writers' meetings, because they did these weekly, they had staff writers, but then they had like weekly, things where writers could come in and just pitch jokes based on, what directives were there. And so I started doing that, never telling them that I lived in Cleveland, because I thought, I'm not a guy who does anything with packing and things like. I mean, I've moved several times in the last few years. I almost really had nothing to do with any of it. I mean, I was in New York with a duffel bag, and I went to these meetings, and I would, you'd get $200 for the meeting, and that was enough for me to fly on to New York to the Islip station on Long Island. And back, I would go into New York, go to the meeting, and they'd be like, can you come back next Thursday? And sure thing. I'd fly back to Ohio, and I just never mentioned that I lived 500 miles away, for whatever, 450. And eventually, one day, they were like, can you just start full-time Wednesday? So I was like, okay, sure. And fortunately, my friend Jason, unfortunately for him at the time, but he and his girlfriend were splitting up, and he needed a place to live. And I said, well, I'll just mail you my keys. And he moved into my place, fully furnished. My underwear was there. So he was all set. And so I stayed in New York, and I wrote on this TV show. And that eventually got canceled. And I started kind of, okay, now what? Wrote for some TV at VH1. Started freelancing, wrote for the New York Times, and, whoever else, some guitar magazines. I mean, I wrote for XXL, a hip hop magazine. I'm a fan of hip hop, but don't consider myself knowledgeable or qualified. It wouldn't be my first area to be like, yeah, let's have Dave write about that. I know about guitars, I know about puppies, those are my areas of expertise. But all by way of saying, I would just write for anyone that would have me do it, and I would do the best job I could. And I, during this time, I got hired to, and tell me to shut up at any point.
No, this is great. Yeah.
I got hired to write for a show called Smoking Gun TV on Court TV as a writer. And by that time, I had sort of started screwing around with video in my apartment in New York, and I brought it to the first writers' meeting and was like, oh, I have this tape of me being stupid. Here you go. And they hired me to be on the show. So I started doing some on-camera stuff, and I kept writing for TV. This is all, in the course of a year or two of being in New York. And then I was at VH1 again, and my office mate, Tony Carnevale, changed my life by, he said, I have a show on the Lower East Side, would you want to do some, perform on that? So I did, and that's how I started performing on stage. And sort of during that time, I just meeting, I would say, like, I'm a good example of, someone that you just move to New York or something, and you're just going to meet more people who are doing the things that you're interested in. When I was living in Cleveland, there was a couple writers, Michael Heaton and Eric Broder, who I really looked up to. Their columns in the Cleveland Plain Dealer and the Cleveland Free Times, respectively. But I knew like 2 guys, 3 guys, 4 guys who were writers. But you go to New York, and all of a sudden, I'm, who's this guy? Granted, I was very lucky to meet people. I met David Rakoff early on and became friendly with him. Malcolm Gladwell, people that were doing the things that I dreamed of doing, and they were just my friends' friends, So things seemed like, oh, I mean, I could, these weren't ideas anymore. They were like, oh, these guys are sitting here and they're doing the things that I want to do,
Yeah.
So from that, I started doing This American Life, and some point, I'd say around this time, maybe like 2007, I got contact. I realize as I'm talking, I've been very lucky in, being friends with some of his friends with famous authors, and
Yeah.
I got my agent, still my agent for books anyway, wrote me out of the blue. He had read an article I wrote, and was like, I think you should write a book. And I didn't know what I wanted to write a book about, and he stayed with me for from when we first met to when the first book came out in 2012, probably 5 years, and just encouraged me. And I was writing like a page a day in a blog, or not a blog, I would say on my desktop, a Word document. And I just gave him that, and I was, and he's like, well, it seems like you're into animals, and you like, anyway.
Trying to find a North Star.
Yeah, see, what is the book going to be about,
Yeah.
And so, because he's like, we have to say that what this book is. And I was like, well, can't I just write a book and I'll just say that's the book, is whatever I feel like writing?
Yeah.
And he's like, no. So I I had a vague idea of what the book would be about, and had some sample. I think I wrote 3 sample essays, and sort of realized out of the theme what the theme of that was: sort of prolonged adolescence and reluctance to grow up, and it's redundant, I guess, but
Yeah.
and I mean, and then so he's like, oh, next time you do This American Life, get Ira to say that you are writing a book and looking for a publisher. And as I'm telling you these things, I realize that I'm very lucky. And so I did a show. It was a live recording, and I had Iris. I said, hey, can you say this at the end when I'm done? Or in the beginning or whatever. And I did that show, and I walked out of the dressing room, and my first editor, Allison Strobel from St. Martin's Press, was there, and she said, oh, let's do a book. So met with them and talked to a few other publishers, and I ended up doing my first book for St. Martin's. She left, hopefully not having anything to do with working with me. She left to go into another career, and then one of my friends from college turned into my new editor. She was already at the company, Kathy Huck. And so I was there. I did the first book there, and then I went over to Blue Rider Press for a book, and part of Penguin. And then the third book was still part of Penguin, but it was about Canada, so it was done through Doubleday Canada. And I'm just sort of throwing random information at you as it's occurring to me.
Well, it's a winding journey, and I'm getting a sense that like there's a common theme was what you stated, is you just write for whoever you could. And
yeah.
It sounds to me like you made an effort to be in community and connected, and
yeah, I think
did you go in like when you started going to New York, and like I guess this is probably the better question then, like did you ever have this conscious moment, like epiphany, like, hey, if I'm gonna like it benefits me to be in community with people who are doing what I want to do.
I think I realized it pretty quickly, seeing how rapidly my life was changing. Not that it was all smooth sailing. I definitely parts I'm leaving out of this are, being super broke at times and having bill collectors, credit card companies call my parents' house back in Cleveland, being like, "Where's our money?" I don't know, like why it's a thug calling from Visa in the way I tell the story.
Kind of, yeah.
Give me the money, or turf your lawn. So, and my mother, they wanted me to get a life coach at one point, and I agreed to it because I thought that sounded funny, and I could probably write about it, which I did.
Did you?
In my second book.
I want to hear about
it. Gave
this.
me a whole essay in my second book.
Yeah.
Dave Hill doesn't live here anymore. But yeah, no, I think that's a really big part of it is just finding people who are doing the things you want to do, and the people, obviously, being in New York, you kind of, it's a lot of people like myself, sort of. I mean, I realize I'm a cliche, just sort of liberal writer, musician guy,
and yet you're the first one on the podcast.
I know, the first, probably no one like me.
You're setting the mold.
But yeah, just kind of, being in, I mean, New York, it's easy to find like-minded people in New York. So because, New York is full of people who fled other places to get away from the people that weren't like them and find people that are like. I mean, that's the beauty of New York and many places, I think, is, is you're there to find this sort of kinship or whatever, find people that are like you. And yeah, I think I recommend it. I mean, I would half jokingly tell people that were looking to get work or get something going, if you don't have a job, or just go out every night, if someone's like, hey, let's go out, just go out, not to schmooze, because I'm the worst at schmoozing. I hate it. It's why I live in New York as opposed to Los Angeles, for example. Even though, I'm giving into cliche, but I think, LA is obviously more show busy and hey, what's going on? We should work together. But I'm more like, you like pizza? I like pizza. And then, it's maybe why my career is where it is. I don't know.
Do you like pizza?
I like pizza. No, for better or for worse. But, yeah, I just think it's good. And for someone like me who, I think I felt very alone. I mean, I certainly aligned myself with similar people in Cleveland. And I think working in the arts or any creative field is easier now than it was 20 years ago anywhere, thanks to the internet. As much as I hate the internet, even though we're using it right now.
Yeah.
I complain all the time, and I'm on it all the time. So, here's my dog. Now I wouldn't say to someone like, oh, you got to move to the city or whatever. I think you can kind of do anything from anywhere. But even, like Cleveland, for example, and I love Cleveland with the exception of the weather, it is, I had never done comedy here until actually around when my first book came out, because I was so mortified at the idea of my parents coming to see me. And so I just never did it. And then, once I had some sort of, I hate to say a name, but, people who had some awareness of me, they would ask me to do stuff. So I started doing it and, quickly met a lot of like-minded people here I never knew before, And now I have a community. I'm here. I'm in Ohio right now.
Okay.
For a bit. My girlfriend and I are helping out her mother during the plague here.
Yeah.
The plague everywhere, I should say. And so now I have a nice community of people here. Same thing of like-minded. Basically just found the same
Yeah.
same liberal nerds as I've become friends with in New York. No, just people in comedy and stuff, things like that. People doing things. So, but I think the beauty of it now, I think it is easier to connect with people and find people that are into the same stuff you're into, whether writing, music, or whatever creative thing you're up to. Mm-hmm. You can kind of find each other all over the world even now. I mean, I could talk about this all day, but it's like, when I started going to London, I had a community there kind of right away because, my friends in New York, for example, in the earlier days of Twitter when it was pleasant, I'm not even on Twitter anymore.
Yes.
I was permanently banned from Twitter
What?
for insulting Trump supporters with like fifth grade mother jokes, because they would see me. I would respond to. I'm not a fan of Trump or anything he stands for. As shocking as that may seem by looking at me.
Yeah.
But I would say things, respond to his bullshit, and then Trump supporters would insult or threaten me or whatever, and I would respond with like, one. I think the reason I got kicked off is Trump supporter called me an idiot, and I said, I'm not an idiot, but I am stupid for your mother's butthole. I'm sorry to bring this juvenile talk to your show, but that was the joke. Is I was just being a child, and I thought, who would argue with a child, but they did anyway.
Permanent ban, huh?
Yeah, but best thing that ever happened to me, honestly.
I bet that shifted the energy in your day.
Yeah, you get two. I mean, I recommend it to anybody because it frees up 2 hours in your day.
Yeah.
Once you get rid of that, for me,
Like,
anyway.
you must have been aware of like the emotional toll it had being on there all the time. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but
No, certainly. I tend to think, social media in general is pretty horrible. I mean, there's good aspects of it, but I think most of it is horrible, and I wish it didn't exist. Even as I, use it for my career, but, sometimes I wonder what the point of it is, even for that.
Yeah.
Because I'm honestly just posting pictures of toast most of the time anyway. But in the early, all by way of saying, in the early days of it, in the 2000s, mid 2000s, I would, post my jokes and things, and the guys from The Onion, who were based in New York at the time, wrote to me and said, oh, you should come to our parties. We have these cocktail parties every weekend, every Friday or whatever. So they invited me to that. So all of a sudden, I knew those guys, and then I was going to London to do my first ever stand-up shows, and they said, oh, well, if you're in London, you should call, these guys, Peter Serafinowicz and Robert Popper and, whoever else they're buddies with. So I went there, and I instantly had a community there. So all by way of saying, but I think all of these things were, granted the internet was super helpful, but it was really about like meeting people, and that's why I think with this talk of like, oh, what are we going to go back to at the other side of the pandemic? Are we all just going to live wherever we want, and we'll all just Zoom till the end of our days? I don't think that'll be the case, because I think really, life is about being in a room together and enjoying cheese or whatever you want together. I think this is a nice little thing to get us through now, but I think in the future we'll want to get back to that, I hope.
Yeah.
But I think we will. I think, because I really think, it just really comes down to it. This isn't my, I know Jerry Seinfeld wrote a thing, I think, in the Times about, people saying, oh, New York's over. And he was saying, like, New York's not over, like, London's not going to be over, Tokyo's not going to be over, because, people want to be together. And, like, that's why Silicon Valley, of all places, doesn't need to exist, because those people, if anyone can figure out how to work from anywhere, it's them. But they're still, not now, but,
there.
they're still there. So I think that was a good example. Plus, I also think, we're creatures of habit. And I think one of the biggest things of why the pandemic has been even worse is because as humans, we're just trying to get back to normal. So as a result, people are like, come over for dinner, and it just perpetuates itself.
Yeah.
So I think when this is over, people will be like, let's all be together again.
Yeah.
I think that's just my theory. Anyway, I'm sorry. I'm just driving all over in my mental golf cart.
Well, I mean, if I didn't have the podcast, I don't know what I would be doing for social.
Yeah.
Because I'm generally antisocial, but I like to be antisocial in public, like go to cafes and generally allow one human being to talk to me at a time. And, this is great for that.
Yeah, it's, there's some, there is something, it's just, there's a DJ, a musician, famous musician who DJs quite a bit in normal times around New York. Like, it's like anytime you turn around, like this guy, I just don't want to say who it is because I don't want to speak for anybody. But I know guys who are friends with this guy, and I was like, why is he DJing anywhere there's a DJ? It seems like he's the DJ.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, he likes to go out and be at the thing, but he doesn't really like to talk to people. Not that he's standoffish, but they're like, he's a shy guy. He just kind of likes to be in the room with all the people.
Yeah.
But if he DJs, he can just be behind the thing and be quiet and just sort of take it all in.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh, that's kind of beautiful, actually.
Yeah, that is. And I've got this word written down because it's something I wanted to discuss with you, because in your journey, the part we kind of gloss over is with both writing and writing comedy and doing social media and acting. There's this element of exposure, right? And vulnerability. And like how have you dealt with that? Like, did you have a struggle with it?
I don't know. Simple thing would be like, oh, I'm a Gemini, so part of me loves it, part of me hates it. But I think in general, I hate it. I want to feel valid, and like anyone, I want to feel appreciated and loved and adored and these things. And, but I really just like being creative, and I like the things that I do. But the audience of it all is part of it. Certainly you can write more behind the scenes. So maybe the part of me that really wants attention is not, I occasionally will write on a television show and be in the writer's room now. But in general, like, don't really enjoy that too much, of being in a room with a bunch of people. And I like to collaborate, but I'm more like into like, what are you and I going to come up with? Not like what one idea does 10 or 15 people have and we'll cobble. I'm more, this is maybe not the best analogy, but creatively, I'm not a big fan of orchestras I like chamber music, because it's more like a small amount of musicians translating, working together to bail out the boat, as Mike Watt used to say. If you know him.
Yeah.
I was in a band, Cobra Verde, that toured with him a couple times, and he used to say stuff like that because he had a trio, and he would say, "Oh, we got to bail out the boat," because it's like you just have bass guitar and drums. You don't have a keyboard player. You don't have a second guitar.
That's exposed.
Yeah, so I feel the same way generally about collaborations. I think it's more fun to really, work with one or two other people and just kind of be like, what are we going to do now?
Yeah. Well, like with comedy, right? There's this, in theory, comedy is like a mix of the truth with pain, right?
Yeah.
And so I've heard you when I was researching, like, kind of treat the same event in different ways, like the full-on comedy performance version of an event, and then kind of behind the scenes, like there's truth to it, right? And like, what is it like in that process? Like, what are you thinking when you're writing and then performing stuff that has this basis in reality and probably real pain, right? Or
yeah, I mean, if you're referring to, I've talked quite a bit about my mom dying, both on stage and in my books, and I'll talk about real things, but I also talk about completely ridiculous things, and sometimes I can't really make sense, like, is this going to work in a show together, or true story? That's very, I talk about all sorts of true things, and everything on stage that comes from the origin is always true, inspired by something that actually happened. But for me, it's fun to take it to the most ridiculous place I can, and just be ridiculous and absurd, and hopefully have people have fun, enjoy that. But usually there's a kernel, there's a thing people can watch on then. Did it sound like I said you people? I didn't say you people. I said people. I just heard it back. I was like, it sounds like there's a thing you people. There's a thing people can watch on the internet. I've done Live from Here with Chris Thiele, formerly Paragon Companion. But
that was like a clean performance.
There's no other way. And believe me, before I go on, I'm just like, oh my God, because it's live and literally a few million people hear it. And you're just like, oh, what if I say the F-bomb?
Yeah. What
if I freak out? So, whatever, all the things that could possibly go wrong.
Yeah.
But like, for example, the thing about, the loaves and the fishes from the Bible that I did on that show really came from true thing of going to church with my dad. And that was the gospel or whatever reading it was. It had to be first or second reading or gospel, one of the three.
Did you ever write a joke or perform something, or get to that point where, like, you realize your parents are gonna have to see what you're doing?
Yeah, he'll say things sometimes, I guess I regret, maybe in the first book we didn't talk about too much, and I know it was maybe I tried to write anyway very honestly about my mom dying, which I think was hard for anyone in my family to read, because it was pain for all of us. So, and then also I went on a nude cruise for a public radio show and talked about that and ended up writing about that in the book. So, the first chapter, I don't know why I put it as the first essay. That was really dumb of me. But I put it first, and so my dad didn't really say a lot about the first book. But then the second book, which is way more about our relationship, and, in a very storytelling kind of way where it's like real, but, I had fun with it and exaggerated who he is, as you would.
Yeah.
And he, he's kind of like, whatever. But he wrote me a really nice note about that second book that was, said I really enjoyed it, and it was like reading a love letter over and over again. So that really, that really,
that's pretty cool.
Meant a lot to me. Yeah. And he wrote me an email, which even the fact that he wrote an email was a huge triumph. But then third book, he said, "Oh yeah, I read a little bit of it. I haven't gotten around to, but I think that's how it goes. If I can offer any cautionary tale, is all your friends and family will buy and read the first book. Second one, maybe. Third, nah."
I have that experience for sure.
Yeah, it's like, your first whatever record, book, whatever the thing is, everyone's going to be like, woo, you did it. And then once it's like, well, this is what he's doing, you're like, all right, I did the first one, whatever.
Yeah. Second one for me, it's like, mom's like, I like it better when you sing that way.
Like, yeah. It's just, my dad will say that with music. Like he'll get a hold of a record by one of my bands and be like, oh, I really like this record. I'm like, you have that record? So he
cool.
kind of, he checks in. My favorite, though, I'll tell you, is I was on this TV show called Comedy Knockout, and I was on it, a bunch of times, and it was, I think still is on pretty regularly on True TV. And so he was like, oh, I was flipping through TV the other night, and I turned on the one channel, and sure enough, there you are. And I was like, oh, he's like, yeah, it was you and some other comedians joking around about something. And he's just like, not your best work. But he was like, I thought it was pretty cool that I could turn the TV on. And there you are, So he did. That was a bit of a compliment, but mostly kind of like, it's just like, whatever. But, I don't think I would react well if my dad was just raving about everything I did. It's kind of, you don't really get that. You kind of just get acknowledgement that it happened, and that's cool. But they're more like, both my mom's gone, but holy shit, as we're talking, I realized tomorrow is the anniversary of my mother's death. That's so weird. I don't know if that would have, I'm sure it would have, but just as we're talking, I was like, holy shit, that's tomorrow.
Yeah.
11 years. So anyway, my parents would never, they more impressed like when someone else mentioned something that I'm up to. They're like, so this person said this or that or whatever, and they think that's cool. My favorite is before my mom died, probably in the last 6 months of her life. She called me up and she's like, oh, my friend, whoever it was, or a friend of hers or an aunt or whatever, was like, they said they saw you on HBO the other night. That's pretty cool, right? And I was like, yeah. And I was thinking like, oh, she's finally gets what I do, And then there was this long pause and she just says, what's HBO? Like, because genuinely, my parents didn't have those channels. They just kind of knew that they were things,
Yeah.
So that was kind of where it was at.
It kind of creates an element of safety, I would think, knowing that your parents aren't going to be swimming in the waters that you are.
Yeah. Bring on the nude scenes,
Closed set, no parents.
Yeah.
So, what is it about comedy in writing comedy that aligns for you? Like, why are you doing that?
I think I just enjoy being silly, I wouldn't say I'm the universally, I mean, I have no doubt I'm some people's favorite, not that many, but I think I just try to be the best Dave Hill I can be, and I like having fun and being silly, and I think comedy, writing, and performing, really everything, I just kind of feel like I'm just kind of figuring it out, and I'll probably always feel that way. I don't think I'll ever be like, yep. Like I remember once hearing or reading an interview with Sting, and he was saying like, I pretty much can just sit down and write a hit. Like I just know how to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And not that he was full of himself.
Yeah.
I've never met him. Yeah. I'm told he's a delight, but
it's not a sentiment you share.
No, I wouldn't say that about anything that I do. I would say, I know when I'm entertained, but I think, as much as art is a way to communicate and express yourself, I think creating anything is like kind of just getting it to the point where it's smiling back at you. Not in that you're like, yeah, we did it, this is great, but like, here's what we did today, and this is cool for today. Tomorrow might be garbage, but right now it's cool that the day began without it, and the day ended with this thing existing on a page or however it exists, whatever you're working on. I think it's cool to just end the day with something that wasn't there when it started, and I think for me that's really why, that's all I'm interested in. I mean, I need to pay the bills, but there's nothing I do that I'm like, here we go, bring on the money, I think anyone that's seen me or read or done it, anything, no one's going to be like, yeah, that guy's got mass appeal. I just kind of do what I'm into, and that's really my goal, and I feel fortunate that I've been able to turn it into how I pay the bills. But if it weren't, I don't think it would change. I would still do, I always say, like, people are like, what do you, I had a beer with a friend I hadn't seen in years, and he was like asking me what I'm up to, and I'm kind of talking about my career mostly. And then he's like, well, what do you do for fun? And I said, well, that's the thing. Like, that's what my career is what I do for fun. Everything, I wasn't talking about my career because I was like, I'm cool. I was more just, everything that I do for my career is what I would do if I, whatever, drove a truck or something. I would come home and I would want to write and play music and paint and draw and act like an idiot around the house. And so I don't play video games or do bong hits or whatever. Not that I'm very in favor of both of those things, but I just don't do that stuff just because I'm busy.
Yeah, just stuff that falls by the wayside because you're enjoying what you're doing.
Yeah, I'm ripping solos, man.
That's fun. Yes, I encourage anybody listening to check out check out the ripping solos.
Yeah, you just got to rip some solo. I do it every day. I just kind of sit at home and rip some solos, then I'll go work on a new book or whatever.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what I do for fun. It's all one thing, you know.
Yeah. Well, there's a difference, right, between like work that's going to be completed and monetized and is a capital P project and work that doesn't have any attachment to a result sometimes. Like maybe the idea of creative play versus a creative project. And
yeah,
do you distinguish between those?
I think the capital, it would be the thing that has a deadline, and that there's a paycheck at the end of the side of that deadline. But that being said, I would still try to have as much fun as possible, because I think that, you know, the best work comes when you're having fun.
Yeah.
And when you're entertaining yourself. And like I can point to so many things that I've done truly just being an idiot to entertain myself, with no intentions of showing it to anyone or having it be anything more than it is in that moment, that went on to be something far more than that. You know, there's a number of things, you know, nothing that went on to become, oh, I was doing this thing about this mischievous boy. Have you ever seen The Simpsons? Nothing like that.
Yeah.
You know,
have you ever dropped anything because you weren't having fun?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think, you know, I had a radio show for a while, and there are many things I enjoyed about it. But I realized at one point, I suspected, I should say, that I was like, I think I'm doing this because I think that I should do it, not because I want to do it.
Yeah.
And then I had a book deadline. Basically, my third book, the deadline was 3 months sooner than I realized. Because they kept saying one date, and they're like, no, we meant you're done on this date. I thought it meant you get it back again. And they're like, no, that's the drop dead date. And so all of a sudden the book was due like 3 months sooner. So I was like, oh my gosh, you know. So I had to put the radio show on hold to finish the book. And then the very next week, when the night of the radio show rolled around, I didn't have to do it. I was like, oh, this is amazing. I love not having to do this. And then when I finished the book, I was kind of like, oh, I should have quit that 3 years earlier.
Yeah.
I was doing it because I thought I should do it, you know? And so now I'm kind of examining other things in my life and be like, what other things do I think I should be doing? But, you know, there's always things. Also with me, I think a lot of times I'll be doing one thing and I'll be like, oh, I should be doing this other thing. And then when I'm doing the other thing, I'll be like, I should be doing this other thing. Why am I doing, you know? I should tell you, I should make this call, but I can jump back on here if you just let me make this call. And
so, hey, we were talking about, you know, you were talking about how you've been getting into painting, and
and this is correct.
Yeah, and I'm wondering how you think about like work versus creative play, and like how you prioritize how you spend your time.
I mean, ideally, everything is creative play, you know, when you're at that state of, you know, flow or whatever. I hate to use cliched words like that people throw around, but, you know, in terms of prioritizing things, like, you know, obviously I try to get, if someone's like, I'm paying you to do this thing or write this thing or whatever, you know, I'll do that first. But I also find, you know, doing things for fun, like painting and things like that, you know, free you up to do a better job on the other things anyway, you know, sort of the equivalent of, I guess, if I were like a lawyer or something, tackling a big case, and then someone said, let's go in the room with all the plastic. Let's go in the ball pit that we keep next to the legal library and bounce around in the ball pit or whatever. I'm just guessing at what happens at law firms.
Do you think that's a billable hour, the play part, and should it be?
Oh, well, I'm sure it is billed by these lawyers, but based on my experience, yeah, I'm sure they're billing. Sure, they're billing for it. But I have a super high energy dog that wants to play pretty much always, and so it's always a constant struggle.
Not a bad place to be as far as a mascot.
Yeah. So, but it leads to stress over who is going to try to get this dog some exercise.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, no, I think it's all creative play, ideally, as I was saying. And, but yeah, if someone's like, hey, this is due Monday at noon and I'm paying you X amount of dollars, then yeah, I'll make that job one.
Mm-hmm.
But I also find a lot of things that I've done creatively just for fun are the things that, because they're coming from that place of really just enjoyment. Those will be the things that will grow into something more, because I am just having fun and entertaining myself, So I think it's a good thing to do for any creative person to indulge in whatever stupid idea that comes, as long as no one's maimed,
Mm-hmm.
I say go for it, because a lot of times good things can come of that. So
yeah, any examples come to mind of just something that had no commercial agenda, but maybe ended up being a meaningful piece of work or valuable in some way?
Yeah, I mean, I would say nothing that went on to become like The Simpsons or anything like that, but I have this band Witch Taint that started off as a totally fictional thing that I just made up in in the early 2000s, because I was into Norwegian black metal and I thought it was really funny how seriously some of the bands took it. And at the time, Norwegian black metal now I feel like is pretty well known, or in the in the cultural zeitgeist, like the Virgin Atlantic Airlines or whatever, like the safety video has like a black metal
Does it?
guy in the video, so it's come pretty far obviously since then. But in the early 2000s that wasn't the case. And I just started emailing this Norwegian black metal record label trying to get my completely made up band Witch Taint signed to a record contract, and I was just doing it for my own entertainment. I'd never even heard of trolling. The intention wasn't like trolling, because it was just me being an idiot and this guy just kind of being patient, emailing back. And it went on for months, and I submitted like a horrible song, and I wasn't really even sharing the emails with people, but I shared them with like a couple friends, and then they shared them with other friends. And once the emails had run their course, a friend of a friend built a website with all the emails, and like removed this guy's email address. And had it been a thing where it was like, oh, look at, I made a fool of this guy, I wouldn't have wanted anything to do with it. But really, the guy doesn't look stupid. It's more interesting how patient he is with this person.
Yeah.
Being an idiot, which is me in this case. And anyway, so I did that, and those emails became very popular for a time, and I made Witch Taint t-shirts. And then in 2017, my friend Trish Nelson was like, people have been encouraging me to like read the emails on stage, and I was just kind of always busy and then finally I was like, yeah, let's do it. And so my friend Phil Costello and I did, and it became popular right away. And, you know, the shows were selling out. We sold out at South by Southwest. And, you know, from there went to like London. We went to Oslo, and there were like actual like black metal guys at the show. We did the Wacken Open Air Fest, which is the biggest metal festival in the world. Just standing there reading these emails, and we'd like gradually added songs. And then from there, you know, we were like, let's take the joke even further and you know, make a whole album, which is the Witch Taint album, Sons of Midwestern Darkness, which came out last April. We were playing live shows as a full band at this point, but then the pandemic came. And sometime during all this, Malcolm Gladwell, who, you know, I've known for years, and he's been a big Witch Taint fan for a long time. You know, he said, you know, we did an episode of his Broken Record podcast that he does with Rick Rubin.
You did? Awesome. I know that's a good podcast, yeah.
Yeah, so there was an episode dedicated to black metal and Witch Taint, and I think it ran as an episode of Revisionist History as well. And then as a result of that, he sort of had me be the resident metal go-to guy, and I did another episode about Pat Boone's In a Metal Mood record.
Oh yeah.
And then, you know, a production company, film and TV production company, heard my episode about Witch Taint and got a hold of me, and now, you know, I have a movie in development on that subject. So that would be a good example, I think, of, you know, something that was truly me just being silly on my computer, not having any intention of anyone ever seeing it. And then, you know, over time. And
do you remember when the first email was sent, like timeline?
It would have been early 2000. I have a file of it somewhere. I mean, the emails that are like known if you go to the blackmetaldialogues.com and look there, I think those would be from 2004, but there were ones that preceded that weren't part of that conversation, where I was just kind of emailing random bands from this email database that was on like some black metal website, and it was just sort of, so that probably went back as early as like 2002, 2001 or something.
Crazy.
Like that.
So it's like by the time a movie comes out, you're talking like a 20-year arc. I mean, overnight success, right? Yeah,
exactly. But, you know, so there's the thing, like, you know, that, and, you know, I have a fake street gang, the Dangerous Snakes Who Hate Bullshit, which again is just silliness and just started as a joke on Twitter. But something about it resonated with people. And I was, you know, it's like 10 years ago, and I was visiting my dad over the holidays, and I was like, I'm going to make a t-shirt. And anyone who wears the t-shirt is the head of their local chapter. And I did that. And what's that? How
do you do that, like, in a way that's, you know, I guess, sensitive?
What do you mean?
Well, I'm trying to think of, I mean, you know, street gangs are a reality, and they're, you know, you know, a component of disadvantage to that, right? And all that. So, like, how did you approach that in terms of, you know, feeling okay about it, and, you know?
Well, I think, you know, from the get-go, the street gang was, you know, I made it clear the things that we were against were things like people who talk really loud on their cell phones, and rap sandwiches, which I think are a scourge on society.
So kind of enforcers of a code.
Yeah, you know, people who double parkers, things like that. Just things that anyone can agree on are just need to be dealt with swift justice, and so it's just silliness. And I think it was and also that, and otherwise a message of kindness to all living things, as long as you weren't engaging in these infractions I just mentioned, and like a similar infractions. So I think it's just a silly thing for people to wear a silly shirt. And so I made a few hundred of those shirts, and then I stopped because it was a pain. And the joke was kind of on me because I had to go to the post office. And when you go to the post office in New York City with, a bunch of packages, they get really mad at you. So I was like, that's it. The street gang's over.
Yeah.
And then a few months ago, I found a better way of doing it, and I started it again, and been doing it again. And it's the same thing. People have fun, buy the shirts, and then I donate 10% of the money to No Kid Hungry, which is a group that feeds kids in need of food. So it's a way to have fun and raise some money for kids, kids. So there.
I have this word written down, things I meant to ask you. One is craft, and I'm wondering like how craft does or doesn't play into your creative play when you're just kind of pursuing these things for fun as they build up.
I'm not sure.
Well, you mentioned like, when you take your freelance gigs and you're writing, you want to do as good of a job as possible. And I know that in the comedy world and writing, right, there's like a lot of elements of self-education or getting better and development and getting the best joke possible, those kinds of things. And I'm wondering how much, if any of that plays into your thinking when you're just playing.
Well, I try to entertain myself and just do the best job I can. And there's some things I'm just not good at. I'm not, like I'm not like a good like none of my comedy or writing really stems from like topical humor, really. It's rare that I make a joke based on, the headlines or whatever, or based on, things that we're all talking about. And I kind of view my output creatively as like sort of like the slime that might be left behind by a slug. It's just sort of, it's part of the it just is what it is, and what comes out, what comes out. It's not like, I honestly suck. Like if you were to like hand me the New York Times and be like, give me 10 jokes based on, today's news, they would be I could do it, but it wouldn't be any joke that I would think is funny.
Yeah.
And to that end, it's just that sort of humor, like I tend to not really respond to anyway. Even watching the late night shows, I'll be like, oh, that's a good joke, but it's not like what tickles me. I like more silliness and absurdity, and not so much making fun of stuff, even stuff that really deserves it, like evil, people like the Trump family and anyone who in their realm deserves to be made fun of because they're pure evil. But just my personal opinion.
Is that just too on the nose to be entertaining?
Yeah, it's just kind of, for me, I'm just more interested in silliness, and by the end of the day, I'm not really I'm looking to escape the headlines, not comment on them or hear someone comment on them. So I'm more inclined to, the things that I like are more just ridiculous. They're not, though some people do an amazing job, certainly people that do a great, Colbert, John Oliver, Sam B. I mean, those people I think are great, and I'm super entertained by that, watching them. But I'm just saying in general that, topical humor is not like what gets me like giggling, generally speaking, unless it's done by total people who are amazing at it, like people I just mentioned, like John Oliver and people like that.
Well, how do you know when your own like jokes or bits are done?
When they're done, like when they're mean when they're finished or when I've had it?
Yeah, when you're when they're finished and ready to share.
I think when they just feel right, I think as far as live performance, just having to go on stage and you learn and you can feel it. That's part of the energy of live performance. You can really, feel it. You can swipe at the energy in the air and feel like, and you can feel when you're full of shit, when the joke really doesn't mean anything to you, sometimes you go like, oh, that seems like a joke, I'll try it out. And then you say it out loud and you can feel that it's not you. And, some of my favorite comedians in the world, like I couldn't, they're so amazing because they're them. But if I tried to say the things they're saying, it wouldn't feel right for me, and I would do a horrible job. I couldn't fake it. But I think that's what's cool about creativity is it's just being the most yourself that you can be, and when I think great artists are so much themselves that when if someone else were to try it, it just doesn't work, or it doesn't work quite as well.
Yeah. How long did it take you to learn that or figure that out?
I think I'm still learning it. I don't think I'll ever be completely sad. I don't ever like finish something and be like, oh, that's amazing. That could not be any better. Oh, look at what I just did. I never feel that way. There's times when I have fun and I'm like, oh, that was fun, But I think I'll just always, I mean, depending on what day you ask me, I think I suck at everything that I do. Suck at writing, suck at comedy, suck at music, suck at playing the guitar.
Yeah.
And then other times I'm like, well, I'm pretty good enough for today.
I meant to
get through today.
I meant to ask you, kind of tangential to that topic. I noticed that when you get on stage, you tend to open with a self, kind of like a pat on your back, or something that makes it sound like you're kind of got a big ego. And I'm wondering how much of that is to play for a laugh and how much of that is to ground you when you're going on stage.
I think it's both. I mean, I think it's, for a laugh, but also kind of to ground me, and also just kind of make fun of the absurdity of performance in general. Part of me, coming from, like Irish, not to harp on my background or whatever, but, coming from like an Irish Catholic background where it's more like you're supposed to just like keep your head down and get a job and think you're maybe just slightly better than garbage. to get on stage in front of people and be like, hey, how's it going? It's so far from that to me that, so I kind of tend to make fun of that, just the very idea that I'm doing it, because there's a part of me that will always feel very silly about it. And then plus just the excuse me, I do think, that performance is, when people walk on stage, and some people can do this very genuinely, be like, hey, how's everyone doing?
Mm-hmm.
And it's a real thing, and it's them, and it's authentic. But then a lot of times you see people like, hey, everybody, how's it going tonight? How's table 4 or whatever?
Yeah.
And you just think like, oh God. So I'm kind of making fun of that too, I guess. So I'm making fun of myself, but making fun of just the absurdity of the job of walking on stage and acting like that's a normal thing to do.
Yeah.
Because, really, if everyone were well adjusted and if the world were perfect, we would just all have some nice dinners together and chat, and there would be no need for this absurd notion of people walking on stage and talking.
Yeah, I suspect suspect you're not wrong on that. Whatever peace looks like, that might be close to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, because
go ahead.
That's sort of the comedy I've always enjoyed the most anyway, is someone who just seems like they're going about their business of what they would be doing anyway if they were home alone, even if their thing is an absurd. The reason I was always so attracted to people like Pee Wee Herman and Chris Elliott and Bobcat Goldthwait and Andy Kaufman, like, when I was a kid, I was just like, obviously those people were, playing characters, but I was just like, they seem insane to me. And they seem like if they weren't on Letterman or whatever, they would be just home in a room alone doing this. And those are always the performers that were the most appealing to me. Not the ones that came out and be like, hey, everybody.
With the highbrow intellectual jokes and the subtext. And
yeah, though I do like that. I mean, there's people that are amazing. I mean, the things that I'm sort of complaining about, there's people that are absolutely amazing at that. I mean, certainly Dick Cavett, who's one of my favorites, a hero, and a close personal friend, if I may name drop yet again during our conversation. He was certainly himself, or some version of himself, would walk out and was a host, and was amazing at that. So that would be the other side of what someone like Pee Wee Herman did.
Yeah, but they all have like this self-consistent presence. They just show up and they're them, whatever that is.
Yeah.
Well, I know we're pressed for time, so I wanted to ask, for people who want to know more about you, how can they find you, and what's maybe the next thing or last thing we should be looking out for?
Well, people can find me. I have a website that I'm bad at updating at davehillonline.com. I'm on Instagram at Mr. Dave Hill, at Mr. Dave Hill. I'm on Facebook, various places, I guess. Though I don't really use Facebook much. And in terms of right now, I have a newish comedy album, The Pride of Cleveland, that people can find wherever you get albums, streaming and whatnot. And I believe it's going to be out. The special version, the video will be out, I think, later this year for people to see. And You could read any of my books. Tasteful Nudes, the first one. Dave Hill Doesn't Live Here Anymore. That's the second one. Those are both essay collections. And Parking the Moose is about my exploring my Canadian roots. And then I'm in the upcoming movie Drunk Bus, which is out this spring. And some other things you'll be seeing me. I'm not sure what stuff I'm allowed to mention just yet. Some things I've just shot, but yeah.
If people follow you, they'll find out.
And also on the play side of things, the good sort of an extension of my artwork. I've started a clothing line.
Oh yeah,
as all Z-list celebrities should. I've started a clothing line called. If you go to thebunnyshops.com. My friends at Secondhand Shorty and I are working together and have a line called Bunny, which is named after my mother.
Cool.
And it will be a line of dresses at first and then maybe grow from there. But it'll be all using my patterns, my artwork. And so I'm excited about that. And who knows what will happen. But that's one crazy harebrained thing, but that I've come up with during the pandemic. But I think it's also, probably the best example I could tell you of just having fun and just seeing what happens.
Just seeing what happens. Yeah. I dig that. See what happens with Dave Hill.
Sure.
Well, Dave, it's been a pleasure having you on the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
I hope you've enjoyed today's episode of The Fearless Storyteller. As a reminder, any and all links can be found in the show notes. And if you're enjoying this podcast, will you please consider leaving a review? By doing so, you'll be helping new listeners discover the Fearless Storyteller podcast.